Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. In this video, we are going to go through some things that you could see them as coincidences, but very happy coincidences where I've been intuitively guided something in regards to not only as what I can provide as clearings and as a healer to my clients, but also as a reality coach to provide greater insights and understandings into reality and how it's forged, and how, over the last few years while I've been doing this, how it's kind of showed up in regards to the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which of course are movies that are deemed science fiction. But what I love about those movies is they are stories being told about infinite possibilities. And that's why I love them so much, because a big thing about what Truly Holistic provides is we don't provide any limitation or bounds to anything that is brought forth to me in regards to what a client will want me to look into, what they want me to assist them in healing. And we're going to go for a few of those that have kind of happened, unfolded through the years. So this is going to be really interesting. And in this video, we're also going to show the visual representation of these things as part of the video as well. So bear with me. This is my first time doing this with this. We'll bring these images up, but it'll show you the visual representation of the very thing that I'm talking about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is many years ago, I was using, and you can see them behind me, I was using geometric devices to amplify my intention. So back in the day when I was many years ago working with clients, when I was about to do all the dowsing in front of me on a chart, and then I go up to the camera with, a Vesica Pisces with a chestahedron or, a stacked pyramid device, also using the 5D cube device there. And we'd hold it up and use that tool, use that geometric device as an amplification of my intent. Now, of course, I learned that geometry is the translation of frequencies, right? And of course, when I started to connect into my infinite consciousness more, which is quite often what I mentioned about our ability to present our natural state, get the heart open, facilitate that, I realized I was facilitating all the foundation, the frequencies that are then translated through those geometries. So got to the point where I realized I didn't need that geometric device, right? I was able to present that through expanding my horizons, expanding my potential. So now, for we just make the intention without the need of a physical device to amplify it through. But what we're going to talk about here is that I was working with somebody here in New Zealand who, yes, we started off doing some clearing work for him, but he was coming up some really good ideas, and we used to kind of meet up every week and it would go on sometimes 2, 3, or 4 hours, and we would talk about ideas, and this was based around ascension, about ascending humanity and moving them in the right direction. So it was kind of like a thinking tank, so to speak, to come up with ideas and all those sorts of things. So within that, the idea was come through, and intuition was coming through, was to create a tesseract. And a tesseract is a 4-dimensional cube, right? It's also called a hypercube. And I'm going to show this now. I actually got somebody close to me to create this device. I'm just going to bring it up now. So there it is there, which is a cube within a cube, right? And so that was also one of the products before I got to the 5-dimensional cube that I was going to now use as an amplification, as a source of energy to be carried through my intention, right, with the work that would provide to my clients. And with that cube there, the tesseract, and then when we evolved to the 5-dimensional cube, which is behind me, that taught me a lot. And what it taught me was that as we go into the 5-dimensional, because when we go from 3D, 4D, 5D, and we go into more, we're going into more of seeing the bigger picture, right? More of our expansive consciousness. And what I noticed was this design was telling me that it was found within, right? Because you start with a 3D cube, right, which you can see from that design, which is just the outside cube, and then the cube within itself to create this hypercube. And what we found with a 5-dimensional cube, it was just creating further cubes that would go within it, right? It's like imploding within. So that taught me that our energy source, right, our journey was not above our heads, but to go within. So it was quite special. Now, how this connected to all of a sudden something being realized in the MCU, there was a movie, Iron Man 2. A very main character within the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man. And in Iron Man 2, I was watching it, and then lo and behold, he was reading through a journal of his father, Howard Stark, and this was Tony Stark, who's Iron Man. And lo and behold, this is what came up. So let's just remove that away and bring this one in. And as you can see there, you see the hypercube, the tesseract, and all its glory. So my jaw dropped in regards to that. And of course, in the MCU, especially the Infinity Saga, where they talk about the Infinity Stones, the Space Stone is what makes up the tesseract, and the tesseract shows itself in a lot of the movies, actually, in regards to the Infinity Saga of the MCU. And the thing about when they use the Space Stone is that it's a wormhole, right? So it can take you anywhere in regards to space-time. So that was a pretty aha moment in regards to that. Now we're going to go to the next one, which is I was shown, get rid of that. I was shown when I was looking at our journey, right? You know, people mention our journey, our path being here, our ascension process. And my consciousness, my guide was showing me that we all have to walk our own path, right? We are known as a human and associated to a collective, which is called humanity, and that we're all kind of playing this one reality, one planet that goes around one star called the sun, and one galaxy, and so on. But we're realizing that that's not the case. We're all here to forge and create our own reality, right? And funnily enough, we don't see through the eyes of another. We have a pair of eyes, right, that see. Yes, we've got a one eye to know. But what we see, which is 0.0035% of reality, so not much of reality is seen, but of course we feel everything. But is that, you know, I'm going to see through this pair of eyes for a lifetime, right? And so it's more about, you know, forging our path, our own path. And when we see ourselves for what we authentically are, and the reason why we came here was to fulfill our soul's purpose. We came here as the soul first, and then became the human second when the mind intervened and took us on another path, which kind of led us astray and took us further and further away from the original purpose of being here as the soul. Is that your soul is your unique energy signature, right? It's like each one of us has a unique fingerprint, right? And I find that interesting because really our uniqueness needs to be facilitated here to imprint our uniqueness on reality. Very much like, hey, we're the painter and that empty canvas is our reality that we're going to forge. So we're forging our own path. So, okay, perhaps we're forging our own path, but how does that fit in with, you know, each one of us experiencing similar things? Okay, our perspective and perception on what we're seeing will change from person to person, but how does that all fit together? And I was shown by my consciousness that it's essentially the image of all the strands of how they make rope, right? That each strand is our path, an individual's path, and what happens there's a device that takes each strand and interwovens those strands together to create rope. Okay, and I'm going to show you an image of that now, as you can see there, right? And so you see, you know, all the strands, and it's put together to create a rope, which we have to emphasize it's interwoven, right? It's a vortex, right? And we've found that the vortex, right, which if we look down the barrel of a vortex is a spiral geometry, is the form of flow. Okay, and flow is everything. If I was asked a word or concept that is bound and connected to the fabric of reality more than anything, I would pick the word flow. For example, our natural state to get our heart open, facilitate our soul, right, and get that more involved. What happens is that we also provide the body with what's required to provide wellness and vitality, right? Flow. The body thrives on flow, right? The blood needs to keep moving, right? When we have sluggish blood, right, congested blood, then all of a sudden we build illness, right? It builds obstruction, blockages in the arteries, which then end up being a myocardial infarction, so a heart attack, all these sorts of things. So if there's congestion in the lymph and the lymph can't move, then toxicity builds up in the lymph because the lymph is our waste disposal unit. When our breathing is labored, right, then all of a sudden we see problems there. If urine can't be excreted, out of the bladder in time, then we get urinary tract infections. So quickly we realized at Truly Holistic that all illnesses due to either obstruction, blockage, or congestion to flow. So flow is everything, and it's also connected to our process to our ability to go with the flow or be in the flow or ride the wave, right? Which is this whole aspect of our natural state of being, and that's our process. That's a momentary process that ends up gets reflected in our physiology and affecting our physiology. So there's a lot connected to this. So anyway, that's how I got explained about, right? That's why we kind of perceive that we're kind of all in one reality when really no, we're all here to forge our own path. So all of a sudden in the MCU there was a show that came on which was Loki. And Loki's a character that's associated with Thor and the Thor movies in the MCU. And in his own series, then all of a sudden, it was very much based on the multiverse and bound on timelines and all these sorts of things. So it's kind of really down my alley. So I was really excited about it. Now, in the second season of Loki, all of a sudden, they talked about this thing called the temporal loom. And of course, temporal means time. Okay, so they're talking about timelines and paths, right? Because quite often we can refer to your journey, your path, as a timeline that you're forging. Okay, so this is what was shown in the series of Loki season 2. That there, right? Isn't that interesting? Right, so what we're seeing is a whole lot of strands come together and interwoven, right? Just like how ropes formed. Now you'll notice that all the device, the contraption that you see in that image, and I'll show you another image here that presents it a bit better, looks like an hourglass, right? An hourglass on its side. Now, hourglass is something that a human designed to measure time, right? Measure the passing of time. Now, a truly holistic, we see that the measuring of time, especially in a linear fashion, and what I mean by that, past, present, future, was really a human creation, right? And to the point that really humanity has now become a slave to time, right? I've got to know when I need to be somewhere and get this done by a particular time frame and all that sort of thing. Now, of course, that is the hourglass when the two chambers are not on its side like I've shown in this image, but upright. And of course, that allows gravity to push the grains of sand from one chamber to the next, right? So which you could see as each chamber as being two polarities that make up duality, right? And duality is really a state, an imbalanced state that doesn't support us because it's not maintaining balance and it's not maintaining flow, which keeps us well and healthy and so on. And it's duality is created when we're up in the mind and thought mentality. And again, that's not us, right? Our guide is what's facilitated and provided by the heart. So the thing is, neutrality is we take that hourglass, right, that is allowing gravity to pass the particles of sand from one chamber to the next, right? And it can't maintain in the middle, right, which is um, in between the two chambers. But when we put it on its side in hourglass, right, we neutralize that gravity, right? And all of a sudden now there's no time because the passing of sand particles can't move from one chamber to the next. But also, if you really look at that hourglass, you could see an infinity, right? Because if you have the hourglass upright, you've got the number 8, right? But if you put it on its side, now you've got infinity, right? And of course, infinite or infinity is no time, right? So we've taken a symbol of the passing of time by simply putting it on its side, which is very much like this temporal loom here. Now all of a sudden, it's no time, right? And as I said, we're from mind, thought, mentality. We are being taught to perceive time in a linear fashion, past, present, future, when really all there is the now, which is often called the infinite now, right? Because if I say that I did something 10 years ago, I didn't do it 10 years ago. I did it in the now, right? Okay. So the thing is, and the only choice you ever have is the choice you're making now, right? So this is why when we say we get our clients into their natural state, right, to be rooted in the now, be as present as possible. Why? Because it's presenting more self-awareness to that individual, to the only choice they have, and that is now, and to make a good choice. Because what we're finding is your choices that are bound and connected to the now, and particularly where you place your attention, how you use your intention, it's how you forge your energy into creating your path, creating your timeline. So you want to be aware of where you're investing your energy, because if you lose that awareness, lose that self-awareness, which we do when we jump up into mind, thought, mentality, then all of a sudden a lot of our energy gets forged into the blocks, the obstructions that sabotage ourselves. And of course, when we get lost up in here, well, then we start to point fingers. That's all these outside influences are doing it. But when we get into sessions with client, we realize those things are in play due to their own energy and what it's doing. So very interesting. Now, another thing you can look at when looking at this contraption, you can see a wormhole or a Einstein-Rosen bridge, right? So you can also see the tree, right? And this is interesting because at Truly Holistic, we've created a map called the Ascension Map, which is your, and I'll bring it on here, which is your, here it is here, which is your consciousness mapped out, and it's depicted as a tree, right? And it might not be clear in that. It's probably more clear in this, right? Can you see that? Right. So the trunk bit is, that in the middle of the wormhole, and the two ends is what then provides the expansion on one end, which can be perceived on this tree as the foliage, right? The outward branches in the foliage. And then the other end of the wormhole is the outreaching roots of the tree. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Let's just go back to where we were, right? So the two ends of the wormhole. So pretty cool stuff, right? Now we're going to move into, now we're going to come back to the Ascension map, right? So as also part of Loki 2 was Loki broke this temporal loom that we're looking at now, or can be depicted as here, right? So that contraption that was holding all those strands together interwoven as a rope. And when he broke it, all of a sudden the strands all weren't part of a rope form anyway. They're all free floating. And of course, then it was his job to formulate them, because all the timelines were starting to die. And he became the energy source for those timelines, and he became the loom himself, and he formulated what you just saw before, which is in his own image, because he was from the Norse mythology, which is the Yggdrasil tree, which is quite often called the cosmic tree, right? And we know that, there's the tree of life and all those sorts of things. And of course, as I showed you before, the ascension map that is depicted in the form of a tree. So all of a sudden he was bounded all that together to create what was the temporal loom now into the Yggdrasil tree, which was amazing. Again, a jaw-dropping moment, because I was like, hey, this is exactly that. Right, which my soul consciousness showed me long before that to put that together and draw that up. And as you can see, it's a tree that vortexes, right? Because again, that's the fabric of reality is created by a vortex, which is the form of geometry of flow. And as you can see it there, it's a spiral. If you look down the barrel of it, it's a spiral. Now, as you can see on the map there, what is deemed as a generation, it means a reality, right? So that's a multiverse map of your unique energy signature, which we've referred to as a soul. And that's quantum entangledly connected, right? The quantum physics term, quantum entanglement. And the cool thing about this is that when all those other generations are versions or variants of you experiencing reality in different realities, right? And you're all interconnected because you use the same energy signature. That's your true oneness, by the way, because we're only here for a little period of time as the human. That the human identity is like putting on a jacket for 70, 80, 90 years. That's not what you infinitely and authentically are. So your true oneness is not bound to this identity you temporarily use. It's bound to what you infinitely and authentically are as the soul consciousness. So and the cool thing about this, right, is that when you're awake, right, because as I mentioned before, you forge reality through your attention intention. Of course, your attention is bound to using your eyes, what you place your focus, what you look at. And so when you're awake, your role here is to forge and create reality, right? Create a reality that you have experience from. That experience is presented to you, and you're there to understand that experience so you can convert it into wisdom. So you allow you as a tree to grow, to evolve, right? Because that's all consciousness wants to do. And of course, to do that, we need the heart involved, because to get to the heart of the matter, right? To understand the experience. Now, when we close our eyes, right, which is to go to sleep at night, it means that our role no longer for now is to, when our eyes close, our role was not to forge reality here, but instead to go back to home, right? Go back to what this makeup of the tree, which is the quantum, and to be counsel, right? Guidance for versions or variants of ourselves and other realities while they are awake and forging reality, to guide them, right? We are deemed their higher self in guiding their experience, and vice versa. When we become awake and our other variants, some of our variants are asleep, they become our counsel and guidance in the way that we should forge. So this is this oneness dynamic that I'm showing here in regards to the ascension map. So it's pretty cool. Now, another one we're going to go to is, now before we go to it, and we reference the movie that is part of the MCU, is on this map, you'll see at the bottom underneath the tree is what we could again perceive as the soil that feeds the tree. You can see it labeled as fire and ether elements, right? So we've brought on all the makeup of the elements as part of you, right? Earth, air, water, and fire and ether. Now, the fire ether components is what is called celestial existence, and this was a term that was given to me quite a number of years, when we were designing this map, and even before that. And there's actually a clearing we do in session where we provide celestial existence, and I explain it to my client that celestial means expansion, an expansive aspect of yourself, and existence means the way that you live. So it's essentially saying you need to live in regards to your expansive aspect of yourself, which is you as a soul consciousness, not this limitation of mind thought mentality guiding the human process. Now, so when celestial, and also was explained that there was once a time where there wasn't the tree, right? Us as a consciousness, and all there was just celestial existence. And why celestial existence intervened and enabled to extend itself through this form, which I'm showing you here in regards to the ascension map as the tree, was because the void, which is what the mind represents, was imbalancing everything. It was expanding too quickly. So celestial existence had to form this aspect of a tree, ourselves as a soul consciousness, to mitigate and bring things into balance. Again, the fractal of why we're here, having an experience here. Okay, we may be an infinite consciousness, but we need to convert those frequencies into a form creation, a reality, to give it meaning, give it purpose, but also to shift everything that is imbalanced back into its balanced state. And this is what the heart innately does, right? So the cool thing is, if celestial existence formed ourselves as a soul consciousness, the cool thing about our experience here, right, is that, okay, our light within is us as our soul, right? SOUL. That's our light source. That's our main energy source, right? Now, our experience as the human outside of ourselves, because the mind externalizes our viewpoint on reality, is that what gives life here? What's our main life source and energy source? And that's, of course, the sun. The interesting thing here, and this is where it connects up with the soul, our inner light. The Latin word in Latin, right, a very ancient language, the Latin word for sun is soul, right, but spelled SOL, right? So it's our externalized viewpoint on light source and energy and life as we know it. And when we internalize, that becomes also soul, right? So I want you to keep that in your awareness. Hold on to that. And now we're going to get into how this connects to a particular movie that came out in the MCU, was called Eternals. All right. Now, one thing before I come to the image I'm going to present to you here, another reference that my soul consciousness told me to, instead of seeing those other generations, right, that are on this map as your higher selves, they also said, see those as your Eternals. All right, so interesting enough. So anyway, I'm going to show you this image now that is part of this movie in the MCU called The Eternals. And this image is of a celestial, and a celestial that creates suns. It creates light, right? And something that's mentioned in that movie is that celestial speaks, right, this cosmic entity that says that without us, your universe, there'd be no life as you know it. Everything would go into darkness, the void, right? What I was just mentioning about why the celestial existence formed ourselves as soul consciousness to bring back into balance, because the void, darkness, was overtaking everything. Interesting, right? So again, another very jaw-dropping moment. And of course, the movie is Eternals, and Eternals are kind of like the children to the Celestials. And if we go to our ascension map, right, the origin of, and again, every tree that we see out in the world, it's there because of the soil that it feeds it, right? The roots are in the soil. So we are a byproduct of celestial existence, and the variants or version of ourselves that are extending that soul consciousness into an experience are deemed Eternals, right? So pretty cool connection to all of that. So that, again, very much a jaw-dropping moment. Now, the next one we're going to go into, which also is part of going back to a character in the MCU, he showed himself in Loki series, but also in one of the Ant-Man movies, which was called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which again to do with the multiverse. And the quantum realm, interesting enough, was a character called Kang. And I'm just going to bring this up. And this character is a character that he was well ahead of his time, if we want to look at time in a linear fashion. he had this technology, he had this chair, which was kind of like a spacecraft that allowed him to travel at any point in time, right? So, and how he mastered that was essentially in this quote here. And one of the scenes in the movie, he was explaining that time is a cage, right? So here's the quote here: time, it's not what you think it is. It's a cage, and it does everything it can to break you. It's not until you free yourself from it that you see just how small it always was. Now, again, very I remember watching that in the movie theater, jaw-dropping moment, because I was like, that's how I perceive it. That's how my soul consciousness has told me to perceive it. Was this aspect of what we were talking about before, that we get taught at a mind thought mentality that time is linear, when really the way it's not even linear. It's a remanifesting loop when we see it that way, because when we are in mind thought, a byproduct of mind thought is mentality, and this is associated to the word mental, right? And how we associate that to mental health and mental illness, which is an epidemic, right? Depression, anxiety, panic attacks, schizophrenia, bipolar, all these sorts of things that are under that umbrella. And when we use mentality is when the past comes in to influence how we perceive the now. And of course, the only choice we have is the now. And if our choice of the now that is influenced by the past forges our so-called future, we're just going to create more of our past, which means we create a remanifesting loop that we get stuck in. We get caged with it. Okay, what he's referencing here. Okay, now another quote that he brought up was that, which is very much to this aspect of linear time, and I don't have the image here, but I'm just going to say it anyway, was he says, I don't live in a straight line, right? I'm talking is what I mean by linear time. And with time, it's hard not to skip to the end, right? So it means that, hey, he broke loose of this cage and he could step back and then see time for what it is, as he mentioned here, right? It's not until you free yourself from it that you see just how small it was, because it was there to limit you, right? And as I mentioned earlier, the whole measurement of time aspect and seeing time in a linear fashion was a human construct given by an idea, concept, and seed by the mind. And the mind is not us. The mind is here to limit you, right? So therefore, you don't fulfill your purpose in being here as the soul, which means you have to keep coming back here, which is the whole idea of reincarnation, which reincarnation is just a fractal of mentality. It's a remanifesting loop that we get caught and stuck with it. Obviously, of course, the reason why we get sent back here was from the soul, because the soul's going, hey, you didn't fulfill the original purpose and why you went last time. We're going to give you another go. Okay, so I guess, that is the end that he's mentioning here, right? Is that the end is that we keep reincarnating until we fulfill our soul's purpose, right? So, which is to convert our experiences into wisdom, which requires the heart, because we need to gain what the experience is presenting, because there is a purpose to every experience we have. It's not there to divide and compartmentalize from mind thought mentality into whether it was a good or a bad experience. Every experience has a lesson for us to learn from, and we can only see that lesson if we perceive our experience from the heart. This is why there's an expression to get to the heart of the matter, right? We need to be in our heart to convert that experience into wisdom. But the problem is, as the human, we are conditioned and taught to use a primary discernment mode of not the heart, but the mind, and to use thought. And therefore, we don't get to the core of the lesson and understand that the experience has a lesson to it, and hence we don't convert it into wisdom, right? So it's interesting stuff, right? Because really we should be choosing to ascend now, so we don't have to go through the loop again. We don't have to reincarnate, and that is to simply see things as all there is now. There's no such thing as linear time. All there is now. And every moment we have an experience, it's just an expression of the infinite now, right? So that's how we really need to shape that in the way that Kang shows here in regards to the MCU. So it's pretty cool stuff. Now, the last one we're going to go to is regarding a movie that hasn't been released yet, but there's been trailers on it. It's really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. It's called The Thunderbolts. It's going to be a movie coming up in the MCU, and it's more to do with this character that is being perceived in the trailer as a possible villain. But again, the MCU, these are movies that come from comics, right? So a lot of the ideas and the things that, it's not going to be exactly the same in the way they're presented in the movies, but in regards to the comics, there's a character called the Sentry, okay? And I'm just going to bring up the image now. And this character, the Sentry, is this powerful being, right? He's kind of perceived like the MCU's version of Superman. And you can see of this image, he's the guy in the yellow suit. He's light. He's like the power of a million suns, right? Again, that word sun, right, which is the Latin word is soul, right? A reference to your greater light. And of course, your greater light, your soul, is not facilitated through the mind. When we allow the mind to steer our ship, we close our heart up and we become our limitation. We become our conditioning, not our expansion, not our infinite potential. But when we get our heart open, we then do, right? So, and the thing about the Sentry is also the power of all those, a million suns, but he's also the void, right? Which you can see in this front page of the comic, The Sentry. And you can see it's a battle between light and dark, right? Which is this whole, I like to say to my clients, it's the original conflict of every human, is that, it's the whole yin yang scenario, is that we have two forms of discernment as the human, right? What we feel from the heart and what is thought from the mind. And we realize that, and this has been clear to be seen after working on thousands of clients all around the world, clear as day, is that they do not align with each other. The mind and thoughts do not align what is felt through the heart. But the conflict is that we're told that the mind is us and the heart is us. And if they are us, they should be aligning, but they don't. That's the pink elephant in the room. What we'll come to find here at Truly Holistic is the only thing they have in common, the heart and the mind, is they are access points, doorways, portals that are enabling an intelligence or consciousness to have access here to extend its will through the body, right? While you're here forging and creating reality. And what we've come to find is what you are is a soul consciousness, right? What we showed before in regards to this map. And this is facilitated through the heart, right? So that then begs the question, what is the mind? What is the mind a representation of, right? That's the quantum that we can see there. What is this darkness? What does the mind represent? And it represents the void, right? Which is what the Sentry's call when he becomes his dark alter ego, right? Because the mind is the ego, right? Humanity's forging, creating things, especially in science. Science is a mind-orientated, circus essentially, where they're creating things that don't need to be created, or they don't align with nature. They're destroying nature, or they're destroying our environment, which includes our local environment, which is our field. It collapses in when we're up in mind, thought, mentality, which means our body's not a state of flow, it's a state of congestion, which is how illness forms, right? And of course, when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about what we believe is ourself, our own thoughts, our own mind, our own mentality working against us because it's telling us we can't do this, kill yourself, you're not good enough. Well, why would you embody something that's saying all that? It's not you. It's clear to see. Okay, so it's really interesting because with the Sentry, he's fighting. He's in a conflict with his light side and this void, right? And the movie and the trailer so far is really interesting because in the trailer it shows him when he goes into his dark side, his form is void, the void. He just decimates all these humans in New York, like in a city, and all that's left is this shadow. Right? The shadow, right? Which is this aspect of the void component that's siphoning, like a black hole, that human's light, right? Right. And of course, I'm referencing a black hole, right? And a black hole is an extremely high gravitational force. And the way that we see the mind, of one mind thought mentality, right? One, we're closing our heart, closing out an infinite reservoir of energy we can tap into at any moment. So we're limited in energy as we are. It's forging us a direction of how we apply our energy in a way that then sabotages us and doesn't even help us. And that ends up being illness. So, examples of that, just general lethargy, right? An extreme example of that siphoning of your own energy is like conditions like MS, which we see all the time when we work on MSS people. Multiple sclerosis is they don't have an ability to hold on to their light, hold on to their energy. Okay. But you will experience it day to day, like, oh, I feel like I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders. That's gravity. Oh, pressure on my chest. I can't breathe. Panic attack. Oh my God. General lethargy. That is you with the mind steering your ship that's sabotaging your ship. And you will feel it as a heaviness. And the Latin word for gravity is heaviness. Right? While when you facilitate that infinite reservoir of energy, consciousness, right? You as a soul through the heart and allowing the heart to lead you. What do you present? Gravity? No, you present levity, right? And it's your process to ascend. Ascension, what's ascend? To go up. What's levity? To go up. So really your ascension process is to facilitate levity, not gravity. Okay, and it's you getting your heart open, presenting your natural state, presenting yourself as light because that's what you are. Okay, as I said earlier, you are here. Celestial existence created you here. There's that tree, right? And I'll bring it up again to mitigate the expansion of dark, the void. Okay, to bring things into balance because the void is shifting things into imbalance. Right. Interesting stuff, right? Anyway, we're going to finish off there. I hope you've really enjoyed. Let's just get this off here. I'd love to hear your comments about this. If you'd like to book a session with me for either energy healing work or reality coaching, go to my website at trulyholistic.net/appointments/. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe to the channel, push the notification bell to be notified when the next video drops. Until next time, catch you later.